She walked into a stranger's funeral, sat in the front row, and cried harder than anyone in the room. And the dead man's son, the one who hadn't shed a single tear all morning, looked at her and whispered, "You knew him, didn't you? The real him. The version none of us were ever allowed to meet." The morning of November 14th is the kind of cold that lives inside your bones. The sky over Chicago is a flat, colorless gray, the kind that makes the whole world feel paused, like even the clouds are holding their breath. Nora Callahan is 34 years old. She is standing on the sidewalk outside St. Michael's Church on North Dearborn Street, gripping a folded piece of paper so tightly that the edges have gone soft. She is wearing a black dress she bought at 9 o'clock this morning from a Goodwill on Western Avenue because she did not own a single piece of black clothing. She had checked her GPS 3 times on the drive over. She had sat in her car for 11 minutes before she found the courage to open the door. She does not belong here. She has never met a single person inside that church. But the man in the mahogany casket at the front of the nave, the man whose obituary she read by accident in a crumpled newspaper she found wedged under her apartment door 2 days ago, that man changed her entire life. And he did it without ever knowing her name. Nora slides into the last pew in the back. She intends to stay invisible. She intends to pay her respects quietly and leave before the recessional hymn even begins. She unfolds the obituary in her lap and reads the name one more time. Raymond Arthur Holt. Age 71. Retired civil engineer. Beloved husband of 43 years to Margaret. Father of 1 son, Daniel. Grandfather of none. She folds it back up. She presses it against her sternum, over her heart. And then, without any warning, without any performance or dramatics, she begins to cry. Not the polite, dabbing kind of crying. The deep, heaving, silent kind, the kind that comes from somewhere you didn't even know was wounded. She does not notice the man watching her from the opposite end of the front row. Daniel Holt is 38 years old. He is tall, with the kind of jaw that looks permanently clenched, and dark circles so deep under his eyes they look like bruises. He is wearing his father's watch, a 1974 Omega Seamaster, because his mother slipped it into his hand that morning and said he'd want you to have it. Daniel has not cried. Not once. Not when the hospice nurse called at 2 a.m. Not when he identified the body. Not when he sat in the funeral director's office and selected the mahogany casket that his father had never once mentioned wanting. He and his father were not close. That is the polite way to say it. The accurate way to say it is that they were strangers who shared a last name and a silence that had been growing between them for 15 years. Daniel flew in from Seattle. He arrived Thursday night. He is flying back Sunday morning. He is doing his duty. That is all. But something at the back of the church has broken his careful composure. A woman in the very last pew, a woman he has never seen in his life, is crying for his father as if she is losing a piece of her own soul. Daniel watches her for a long time. His jaw tightens. Something moves behind his eyes. Something complicated. Something that looks almost like grief. After the service, as the other mourners filter out into the pale November air, Daniel walks to the back of the nave. The woman is still seated. Her head is bowed. She is pressing the back of her hand against her mouth. Daniel slides quietly into the pew beside her. He does not say, "I'm so sorry for your loss." He does not say, "How did you know him?" He looks at the empty pulpit at the front of the church for a long, still moment. And then he says, very quietly, "You knew him, didn't you? The real him. The version none of us were ever allowed to meet." Nora looks up. Her eyes are red-rimmed, her mascara long gone. She stares at the man beside her. There is something in his face, the exhausted, hollow architecture of it, that she recognizes immediately. Not his features. His expression. She has worn it herself for years. The look of someone who lost a person before that person ever actually died. I never met him, Nora says. Her voice is barely above a whisper. Not once. I didn't even know his name until 2 days ago. Daniel turns to look at her fully. Then why are you here? Nora opens her hand. The folded obituary lies in her palm. Because he saved my life. And I never got to thank him. They end up in a diner 2 blocks from the church. It is the kind of place that has never been renovated, with red vinyl booths, laminate tabletops, and a coffee that tastes like it was brewed at dawn and has been sitting on the burner ever since. It is exactly right for the conversation they are about to have. Nora wraps both hands around her mug. She stares at the surface of the coffee for a moment before she begins. 6 years ago, she says, I was living in a studio apartment on the south side. I had just lost my job. I was a junior architect at a firm downtown. They downsized. I was the last one hired, so I was the first one cut. She pauses. Her thumb traces the rim of the mug. I wasn't just broke, she continues. I was gone. Completely hollowed out. I had moved to Chicago from a small town in Tennessee because I believed in something, believed I could build things that mattered, that changed the shape of people's days. And in one afternoon, that was just over. I stopped eating regularly. I stopped answering my phone. I stopped opening the curtains. Daniel listens. He does not interrupt. He does not offer the performative sympathy that most people reach for in situations like this, the "oh that's awful" and the "I can't even imagines." He simply listens, and Nora feels the rare, startling gift of that. I used to sit by my window at night, she says, because it was the only thing I could manage. Just sitting. Watching the street. There was a park bench directly across the road, under a broken street lamp. And every single evening, between 7 and 8 o'clock, an old man sat on that bench. He always had a brown paper bag, a sandwich, I think. He always wore the same green coat. And he always had a notebook. She sets her mug down. He wrote in it every single night. Just sat there alone in the dark and wrote. For an entire hour. He never looked at his phone. He never spoke to anyone. He just wrote, completely absorbed, like what he was putting on that page was the most important thing in the world. I don't know how to explain what it did for me, Nora says. Watching him. There was something about his complete dedication, his absolute refusal to let the night be empty, that made me feel like purpose was still possible. Like the act of showing up for something, even something small, even something no one else understood or cared about, was enough of a reason. Daniel has gone very still. He is staring at the table. I started getting up to watch for him, Nora continues. That became my reason to get out of bed. 7 o'clock. Is he there? And he always was. Every single evening, for 8 months. Rain, cold, it didn't matter. Green coat, brown bag, notebook. She smiles faintly. It is the saddest smile Daniel has ever seen on a living person. By the time spring came, I had started drawing again. Little sketches at first. Just the view from my window. The bench. The broken street lamp. Him. I applied for a drafting position at a small firm in Logan Square. I got it. I got my life back. And it was because some old man I never spoke to refused to let a park bench go to waste. She opens her purse and sets a small, worn sketchbook on the table. She slides it across to Daniel. He opens it carefully. Inside the front cover, rendered in fine graphite lines, is a park bench beneath a broken street lamp. On the bench is an old man in a green coat, his head bowed over a notebook, absolutely absorbed. The drawing is beautiful, quiet and alive, the kind of image that makes you feel the cold air and the hush of a city night. Daniel stares at it for a very long time. When he finally looks up, his eyes are bright. He went every evening, Daniel says. His voice has changed. Something has cracked open inside it. For 11 years. Not just the 8 months you watched him. 11 years. What was he writing? Nora asks softly. Daniel reaches into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He sets a battered, green cloth-covered notebook on the table between them. Letters, Daniel says. He was writing letters. To me. The silence between them is full, not empty. It is the kind of silence that holds weight. We had a falling out, Daniel says at last. When I was 23. It was about a woman, it always is, right? I was going to marry her. He thought I was too young. Too impulsive. He said things. I said worse things. I left. I moved to Seattle. For 15 years we had birthday cards and Christmas calls and nothing real in between. He taps the cover of the notebook with one finger. My mother found these after he passed. There are 11 of them. Every single night he sat on that bench and wrote me a letter. Told me about his day. Told me what he was reading. Told me what he regretted. Told me he was proud of me. Daniel's voice breaks on the last sentence. He presses his lips together hard. He never sent a single one, he says. Not one. Because he was afraid I'd throw them away without reading them. He said that in the first letter of the last notebook. He wrote, Daniel opens the notebook to the back. His hands are not steady. He wrote, I write to you every night, Daniel, not because I think you'll ever read these, but because the act of talking to you keeps the love alive in me. A love stored only inside a man's chest turns sour. It has to move. Even if it only moves as far as a page. Nora's hand goes to her mouth. Daniel closes the notebook. He looks at her across the laminate table. In the harsh fluorescent light of the diner, two strangers made unexpectedly intimate by the life and death of one quiet old man. He didn't know he was saving you, Daniel says softly. No, Nora agrees. But he was saving me too. Every single night. On that bench. They talk for 3 hours. The coffee gets cold and the diner begins to fill with the early dinner crowd, and neither of them notices. They talk about Raymond, Daniel sharing the man his father had been before the silence, Nora offering back the stranger on the bench who had been, without knowing it, a lighthouse. They talk about loss. They talk about the particular loneliness of American cities, the way 10 million people can live within miles of each other and still manage to die strangers. At some point the conversation shifts, the way conversations do when the ice has been completely broken and the real self start to surface. Nora learns that Daniel is an environmental engineer. That he builds water reclamation systems for cities that are running dry. That he has spent the last 4 years in Seattle working on a project that will, if it succeeds, provide clean water to 300,000 people in a region that will otherwise run completely dry within a decade. Daniel learns that Nora is an architect. That she designs affordable housing in neighborhoods that developers have written off. That she has spent the last 6 years fighting tooth and nail to keep porches on buildings, because she believes, fiercely, empirically, that the porch is the last American institution for organic human connection and that every developer who eliminates it in favor of a slightly larger living room is committing a small but genuine act of cultural violence. My father would have loved you, Daniel says. There is nothing performative about it. It is simply true. I think he did, a little, Nora says. Without knowing it. When they finally stand up to leave, it is dark outside. The Chicago night is sharp and bright-starred. They stand on the sidewalk outside the diner for a moment, the awkward geometry of goodbye pressing in around them. The funeral is done, Daniel says. I fly back Sunday. I know, Nora says. A pause. The city hums its low, indifferent hum. Can I see the sketch again? Daniel asks. The one of the bench. Nora hands him the sketchbook. He studies the drawing for a long time, his father, bent over his notebook, absolutely absorbed, the broken street lamp pouring its fractured light across the page. He looks happy, Daniel says quietly. He was, Nora says. Every single night. He was the happiest looking person I have ever seen doing something completely alone. Daniel closes the sketchbook. He hands it back. His fingers brush hers, and neither of them pulls away immediately. There's something I haven't told you yet, Daniel says. His voice has gone careful again. Measured. Nora looks up. What? The last notebook, Daniel says. The one from this year. The last entry. He wrote it 3 days before he went into hospice. What does it say? Daniel reaches into his jacket. He opens the green notebook to the last written page. He turns it and holds it out to her under the light of the street lamp. Nora reads. November 11th. Daniel, my son. I am tired tonight, but my heart is surprisingly light. There is a young woman who sits in the window of the building across from this bench. She has been there for years now. I do not know her name. I do not know her story. But I have watched her come back to life the way a city comes back after a hard winter, slowly, then all at once. Tonight she had her window open despite the cold, and she was laughing at something on the phone, and the sound of it carried all the way across the street to this old bench. I have been thinking lately that we save each other constantly, without ever knowing it. That the whole invisible architecture of human survival is built from moments of accidental witness. I wrote to you tonight to tell you that I love you. And to tell you that I am no longer afraid that you won't read these. I realized, finally, that the writing was never really about whether you received it. It was about becoming a man worthy of saying it. Come home, Daniel. Not for me. For yourself. All my love, always. Dad. Nora folds the notebook closed and hands it back. She is not crying this time. She is somewhere past crying, in the deep, still country on the other side of it. He knew, she says. He knew I was watching. Yes, Daniel says. And he kept coming anyway. Yes. This was never just the beginning of something between Nora and Daniel. It was the completion of something Raymond began, the final, deliberate act of a man who understood that love, expressed faithfully and without guarantee of return, always finds its destination. Daniel does not fly back to Seattle on Sunday. He calls and changes his ticket. He tells himself it is because there is more to handle with his mother, more paperwork, more logistics. He tells himself this for approximately 48 hours before he stops pretending. On Saturday afternoon, he calls Nora. He asks if she will show him the park and the bench. She says yes. They stand on the sidewalk and look at it together, the green bench, the repaired street lamp, the city finally fixed it, 2 years ago, the ordinary, unremarkable square of park that somehow became the center of 3 converging lives. What do you do with 11 notebooks? Nora asks. Read them, Daniel says. Slowly. 1 letter a night. She looks at him. That's exactly right. I know, he says. He told me to, in the last entry. He wrote, don't rush through them, Daniel. 1 a night. Give yourself time to answer back, even if only in your head. That's the whole point of a letter. It's a conversation that refuses to accept silence as a final answer. Nora is quiet for a moment. The late November light is low and golden, the kind that makes even concrete look warm. Can I ask you something? She says. Yes. The woman. The one you almost married. The one the fight was about. Daniel exhales slowly. What about her? Was your father right? Were you too young? Too impulsive? A long pause. A taxi blares somewhere 2 blocks north. A child on the path behind them runs laughing past a grandmother who calls after him in Spanish. Yes, Daniel says at last. He was right. I just needed 15 years and a stranger's funeral to admit it. Raymond Holt wrote those letters on the park bench for 11 years not because he was waiting for his son to return. He was writing himself into the kind of father worth returning to. The bench was not his punishment. It was his practice. 2 months pass. Daniel does not move back to Chicago. But he comes back. Often. He finishes his Seattle project remotely for 3 weeks in January, sitting at the corner table of the Logan Square diner where he and Nora now have what the owner, a stout woman named Petra, calls their booth. He brings his laptop and his father's notebooks. Nora brings her sketchbooks and her red pen and her absolute, passionate opinions about load-bearing walls and the moral failure of open-plan apartments. They argue about everything except the things that matter. On the things that matter, they are, startlingly, exactly aligned. One evening in February, Nora spreads a set of blueprints across the booth table. She is designing a mixed-income residential building for a neighborhood in Pilsen. She is fighting the developer on the ground floor community space. He wants retail, she wants a covered common area with benches. Actual benches. The kind people sit on. He says benches don't generate revenue, Nora says flatly. Daniel looks at the blueprints. He looks at her. Tell him benches generate people, he says. And people, over time, generate everything. Nora stares at him. That's going in the proposal, she says. My father said something like it once, Daniel says. In Notebook 4. On a Thursday evening in March, Daniel reads his father's last letter. He has been rationing them, 1 a night, exactly as instructed. He sits on the green bench in the park, the same bench, in the same pool of lamplight, with the last notebook open in his lap. The letter is not long. His father was tired when he wrote it, and the handwriting shows it, looser, slower, the pen pressed less firmly into the page. But the words are clear. Daniel. This is my last letter for a while. My hands don't want to cooperate the way they used to. I want to tell you 3 things. First, I was wrong to say what I said about the woman you loved. I was afraid of losing you to your own life, and I called that fear wisdom, and it wasn't. I am sorry. Second, I have spent 11 years on this bench trying to become someone worthy of your forgiveness. I don't know if I have managed it. But I want you to know that the attempt itself has been the greatest work of my life. Better than any bridge I ever built. Third, there is a young woman in the window across the street who does not know I can see her light. She is the reason I believe in invisible grace, the mercy of being witnessed without knowing it. If you ever meet her, be kind to her. She is going to matter. I love you, son. Come home. Daniel sits on the bench for a long time after he finishes reading. The Chicago night is cold and clear. Across the street, the window of Nora's building glows warm and yellow. He can see her silhouette at her drafting table. She does not know he is watching. He takes out his own notebook, a new one, plain black cover, bought last week without quite knowing why. He uncaps a pen. He begins to write. Raymond Holt saved Nora Callahan's life the same way he saved his own, not through a grand gesture, not through money or intervention or even words, but through the stubborn, faithful act of showing up and refusing to let the darkness go unmet. He was proof of life. That was everything. Spring arrives in Chicago the way it always does, abruptly, almost rudely, as if it forgot to call ahead. One morning it is gray and frozen and the next the whole city smells of rain-soaked earth and something close to hope. On a Saturday in April, Nora's Pilsen building breaks ground. The developer, after 3 rounds of negotiations that Nora won every time, kept the benches. The ground floor community space is covered, planted at the corners with 2 young oak trees whose canopies, in 30 years, will shade the whole courtyard. Daniel is there for the groundbreaking. He stands at the back of the small crowd, next to Nora's mother, who is driven up from Tennessee and who is, Nora warned him, very direct. Within 4 minutes of meeting Daniel, Nora's mother touches his arm and says, "You have your father's eyes. I can tell you're a writer." "I'm not a writer," Daniel says. "You have a notebook in your jacket pocket," she says pleasantly. "Don't argue with me." At the ceremony, Nora says a few words. She talks about the neighborhood. She talks about what porches and benches do for cities. She talks, briefly, without naming him, about an old man on a park bench who taught her that showing up is a form of architecture, that the structure of a life, like the structure of a building, is built from small, repeated acts of load-bearing. Daniel, at the back of the crowd, writes 3 words in his notebook. "She is magnificent." He pauses. He adds 3 more. "Dad, you knew." This is how Raymond Holt saved Nora Callahan without ever meeting her. He showed her, night after night, in the simplest possible language, the language of a body that keeps showing up, that a life can be rebuilt from nothing but will and a blank page. She did not need him to speak to her. She needed to see someone who had not given up. 6 months after the funeral, Daniel accepts a position with a Chicago-based environmental consultancy. He does not tell Nora it is because of her. She does not ask. They have reached the particular understanding of 2 people who have been shaped by the same invisible hand. They do not need to narrate every movement of the thing growing between them. They trust it the way his father trusted the bench. Show up. It is enough. On a warm evening in October, they are walking back from dinner along the lakefront. The city blazes to their left. The water to their right is dark and immense and full of stars. Daniel stops walking. "I have something for you," he says. He reaches into his jacket. He hands her a book, small, cloth-covered, the color of a winter sky. She opens it. Inside the front cover, in Daniel's handwriting, it says, "For Nora, who watched a stranger keep faith with the night, and learned from it. Who taught me that love is not a feeling but a practice. Who is, without question, my father's greatest gift to me. 1 letter a night. I've been writing since March." Nora turns the pages. The book is half full. Letters. To her. Written in a diner, on a bench, on airplanes, and late nights and quiet Sunday mornings. Ordinary days made remarkable by the simple act of being written down and kept. She presses the book against her chest. The lake moves in the dark beside them, patient and enormous. "You are exactly like him," she says softly. It is the highest thing she knows how to say. "I'm trying to be," Daniel says. He takes her hand. They walk on, along the edge of the city, 2 people carrying the living weight of one man's love, finding in it not an ending, but the most durable kind of beginning. This is who Nora Callahan was, and why she sat in the front pew of a stranger's funeral and cried harder than anyone in the room. She was not mourning a man she had never met. She was mourning the last evening of a light she had lived by for years, and giving thanks, in the only way she knew, for a kindness so quiet it never even knew its own name. There is a version of love we almost never talk about, the kind that does not require the beloved to know it exists. Raymond Holt sat on a park bench for 11 years and poured himself faithfully into the night. He wrote to a son who could not hear him. He kept faith with a routine that no one validated or applauded or even noticed. And in doing so, he became, without planning or intention, a lighthouse. A proof of life. A reason for a young woman across the street to open her curtains, pick up a pencil, and come back to the world. We are so focused, in this culture, on the love that is received. The love that is seen, acknowledged, liked, and returned. We have forgotten, or perhaps never fully understood, the extraordinary power of love that is simply practiced. Love as a daily act. Love as showing up. Love as sitting in the cold dark with a notebook and refusing to let the silence be the last word. Nora did not need Raymond to speak to her. She needed to see someone who had not given up. Daniel did not need his father to call him. He needed to find, in 11 battered notebooks, evidence that he had always been worth fighting for. And perhaps that is the most important thing this story is trying to say, that we are always, without knowing it, being watched. That the life we live in private, the habits, the disciplines, the small daily faithfulnesses we think go unnoticed, is being witnessed by someone who needs it desperately. Show up anyway. Write the letter anyway. Sit on the bench anyway. Someone, somewhere, is watching your light.